right now, we have to go to our guest who's joining us for the very first time here on the PHLY Sixers show. Joins us on the post-game show. And quite honestly, I thought we would be getting the Hall of Famer Marc Stein when we would be talking about, let's say, some double-digit wins and single-digit losses through 14 games. But yet, here we are as we welcome in our partner on the ALLCITY staff here, joining us also from the DLLS team in Dallas, the newest launch in September, and they are doing a great job, a tremendous job, including the Mavericks show. We wish we were talking, Mark, like some Mavericks losses here for some Sixers wins, some Mavericks wins with some Sixers wins, but unfortunately, here we are. Welcome to the show. Sorry you have to join us with such a terrible start to the Philadelphia 76ers season.
Well, I got to say, I listened to your guys' last 10, 15 minutes, and you guys are, man. No, but you guys are all over it. Like, I was riveted to every word. And, you know, about a week ago, the Mavs played the only game on the schedule in the NBA on Thursday night. They were at Utah and lost a game that Utah tried to give back to them. And I thought that was such a bad, like, that has to be the worst loss I'm going to see for any team all season. But after listening to you guys and considering all the circumstances, I think the Sixers might have just bumped the Mavs, lost at Utah. They might have gotten Dallas off the hook because, man, it is I mean, there's just no way around it. I mean, this is stunningly dire. They could be 0-14.
Yeah, I mean, they're 2 overtime games, Mark, away from 0-14. That's what's crazy. And I think to your point, you bring up Dallas. The thing that the Mavericks have as an advantage is that they're coming off a finals run, right? If they start slow, if they have some bad losses, you can rationalize a little bit as, okay, this isn't good, obviously, but we've seen this team rev it up. We've seen them go on, long stretches where these guys can get it together and play high-level basketball. This is a team that there is no proof of concept for, right? I mean, majority of the roster they brought in this summer, and I guess the first thing I would ask you is, like, where do you go from here? Because this is, I mean, even the biggest skeptic of Paul George and these signings would not have imagined this type of start.
No, and look, I'm one of those people who thought that the Sixers had, like, as close to a perfect offseason as you could have. I mean, I've written it a bunch of times that, wow, Morey actually convinced Tyrese Maxey, okay, we need you to wait a year before we can pay you. Never happens in the NBA. Please wait a year. But then they did get everything done that they wanted to get done. And even the minimums and the lower cost bargain signings, they all looked so good. So no, the Sixers aren't coming off a finals appearance. I know we haven't said that for almost 25 years, but they were coming off what looked like a dream offseason. And look, I've covered Nick Nurse going back to I met Nick Nurse 25 years ago when he was coaching in England. And that's how long I've been following him. He's always been known as this super creative guy who coaching in England, coaching in the G League. I would have thought he would thrive in this chaos that has resulted from all the injuries and having to find lineups and deal with a crisis. But to hear the way you guys are talking about Nick blows my mind. Like, this whole thing is so difficult. I'm sorry for the pun. This wasn't an intended pun. This is difficult to process. It really is, to see the Sixers.
You just run into that pun over and over again covering this team. You can't escape it.
And even just the team meeting. Okay, we knew there was a team meeting. Tim Reynolds from the AP reports, hey, we haven't seen these guys for an hour, so there's going on. But how fast the details of that meeting leaked out, I mean, it has been chaos. And I totally agree with everything you said. To lose to the Grizzlies, as banged up as they are, I mean,
On the
when
second
you're
night of a back-to-back, by the way.
the Sixers should have been desperate tonight, and again in the second half, just overrun.
Marc Stein from the DLLS Mavericks joining us here, Hall of Famer on the PHLY Sixers post-game show. And Mark, as you say that about Nick Nurse, we have been more on the defensive side for Nick Nurse because last season, a first-round exit, dealt with a ton of injuries. This year, again, dealing with a ton of injuries, including his 3 All-Stars that he has. So he never really got a chance to see his complete roster and to see exactly how they would play together. But with someone like you who has known Nurse for 25 years, seen how he has done this, and we also thought the same thing of being very, very creative with the lineups that he would have. What has stood out to you the most, not only from this season, but also last season, in dealing with those injuries, coaching through last year, and these first 14 games of the season? What has stood out to you from Nick Nurse?
I mean, this thing, there's just like, I'm 1,500 miles away, but the cloud that is hanging over this squad right now is palpable. And so, like, I guess you look, the coach is always the first one to get the blame, but like, it's hard. I mean, it's hard from my seat to see, like, is it on him? I mean, is it really on him? I mean, like I said, I listened to Kyle made some very compelling points. Maybe Kyle needs to be brought into the next coaches meeting. And look,
listen, I'm certainly not qualified for that job.
Yabusele has been great, and his role probably should be expanded with the way he's playing. But it's like, I can't believe that Nick doesn't see it.
Yeah.
But look, from as far removed as I am,
yep,
it's still stunning that, like, this is the first time that the 3 main guys are out on the court together and they don't get through one game. Maxey can only go for 20 minutes. Paul George gets hurt again. And I mean, to try to even, I'm not even going to try to say silver lining, because we're beyond the point of silver linings at this point. Like, this team needs wins by any means necessary. And the Sixers are not the only team in the league that has faced I mean, you look at Milwaukee. Yeah. I mean, Milwaukee not only got off to the same 1-6 start, but has been dealing with all these headlines about how long before their guy asks out. And Giannis Antetokounmpo has just, in the last 5 games, said, we're not losing, and I'm gonna deliver this team to wins without Middleton, whatever the circumstances are. And Giannis has just carried these guys to, could have been 5 wins in a row if not for some dubious refereeing that Milwaukee lost a game on. And then Orlando. Orlando loses Banchero. They're offensively challenged with Banchero. But look at how the Magic have responded without Paolo Banchero. Now, the Sixers would counter and say, we're not just missing one guy, we've been missing all our guys. And I get it. But I mean, to be in this deep of a hole already is staggering.
Mark, I want to circle back on something you said. You mentioned the speed at which these details leaked out of that team meeting the other night. You've covered a lot of different teams and, frankly, at this point, different eras of the NBA. Do you think that's more a reflection on who is in that locker room, or do you think that's more about, how things have changed, where it's a chatty league and it's so easy to get something from, one text gets sent out or one call is made, and then that just spreads like wildfire in a way it never did before?
I think it's more of the latter, because it's always been a chatty league. It has always been a very chatty league. But yes, the tools that we have at our disposal now does make it spread. And really, it doesn't take that much to imagine that some player in that meeting tells their agent or someone close to them, and it could move in that fashion. I mean, that's as easy as it could get around. Like, there's this sinister notion that, one of the 15 players in there, specifically wanted it out. Like, that's hard for me to believe. Like, it doesn't even need to go that deep. It can get around much easier and plenty quicker. But the reason I bring up the speed is because Embiid has had such a rocky start to the season that inevitably you wonder about his reaction and just how he's going to take it. And, I have not been around this team for 1 second all season. So that was another reason why, like, I kind of wanted to come on with you guys because you guys are there. Obviously, when the team's on the road, you're not there. But, like, I wanted to hear it more from you guys who are around them. Like, what is the vibe like when you are there? Because it has to be, more than panicky, more than jittery. Because you asked me, like, what are the change? There are no options to change this thing. I mean, really, let's be. I mean, they're not going to make a coaching change. They're not going to make a GM change. Nobody's tradable right now except McCain. You're not going to trade this rookie who's looked sensational as the number 16 pick. Like, they're going to have to get to December 15th before they can seriously look at doing anything. They're going to have to participate in their own rescue here. And that's why tonight is so worrisome, because they had to win this game to start somewhere after this team meeting that goes viral, and you're playing an injured, an opponent that's dealing with injuries on the second night of a back-to-back, and you can't take advantage of that situation. I mean, I can't imagine what that locker room in Memphis is like right now.
I mean, at this point, does it become players only meeting after that? Because when you have one team meeting and it ends with, they made back some ground at the end, right? And like, yay, we can throw a parade. They fought back in the final few minutes and made it a tight game. But you're down 20 to that team with like 8 minutes left in the game. That is not a team that should have even been capable of building a 20-point lead at any point in that game. Not especially when this is like you're to some extent. The East standings are what they are, but their backs are against the wall. They
No
know,
question.
and I think people keep talking about, well, look, they can make up ground and they can get to, play in or like the 6th seed or wherever. But with the aspirations they have, you can't. That's not acceptable either, right? Because if you end up in one of these low seeds, then as this team that's unproven, that has been slapped together in an offseason, that the question marks are there with Joel as like a playoff guy, whether that's health, whether that's just performance, then you have to win every series on the road to do what you came into the season to do. And that's extraordinarily difficult. I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the only team lower than a 5th seed or 4th seed even to win the title was the Rockets when they won in the mid-90s. And that was a back-to-back. And that was a situation where they traded for Drexler mid-season and they completely changed the team, right? So like them being in that seed undersold, one, the talent, the experience, but also the process of team building they were going through. I just don't know if that's the only case that you can point to is like, we can get it together by kind of sneaking in and limping into the playoffs. That's a fantasy. That's a dream. I don't know how you could believe in that.
Yeah, and you nailed it. That team, they were defending champions, and they traded for Drexler midseason. Like, so they were a 6 seed on paper, but nobody looked at them like a 6 seed, and certainly not after Drexler is reunited with Akeem Olajuwon, who's a reigning champion for the first time in his career. And look, we've seen mid-season trades. You have Drexler going to the Rockets in 95. You have Rasheed Wallace ending up with the Pistons in 04. You have Marc Gasol going to the Raptors in 2019. I mean, that's really the list when we're talking about mid-season trades that have led to championships. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, this group has to do it. And I guess the one thing you can cling to after this loss, which again is as bad as it could be, is that at least Embiid finally looked closer to the Embiid we've been waiting. We could list 25 issues with this Sixers team to this point this season. Nothing compares to the fact that in the first 3 times we saw Embiid on the court, he didn't look anything close to the guy who was averaging more than a point a minute last January when he got hurt. I mean, last January, he was doing, he was scoring at a rate that like it was Wilt Chamberlain stuff to score, to average more points per game than minutes per game. And he has looked so far from that standard in the few instances we've seen him. So to see him have this kind of game tonight, again, I don't know that you can't really say silver lining, because this thing has gotten too, the hole is so deep that nobody's buying silver lining. But, is that something to rally around?
Yeah, it is. And Marc Stein from the DLLS Mavericks of the ALLCITY Network, our teammate joining us here on the PHLY Sixers postgame show. And Mark, it made me think, number one, you saying all that about Embiid and him coming out, having the game high 35, rebounding from the poor performances that we have seen. This comes on the heels of being reported out of that meeting that he didn't know what type of offense they were running, number one. That was puzzling in and of itself. But it also brought me to, we would also discuss how the Mavericks got off to a decent start last season, hit a rocky road there, made some big adjustments at the trade deadline in adding P.J. Washington and Gifford, and bringing that team together, and what they have done to make it to the NBA Finals and do what they did. We tried to lean on some of that if the Sixers got into a rocky start here. But right now, I mean, what did you see, since you were with that team and you asked us about being around this group, what did you see in that team to have them turn around the way that they did to make a run to the finals, where we can maybe try to lean on some stuff to pay attention to here in Philadelphia?
Well, they tried to do what Kyle just said you absolutely don't want to do, and Kyle's totally right. I mean, the Mavs had to beat 350-win teams to get to the finals without home court advantage in any series. They did that, and then waiting for them in the finals was a Boston buzzsaw, and you saw how that turned out. Now, again, the Mavericks if the Mavericks find a way to win those finals, then they go on that very short list of teams that did make mid-season trades, and it led to a championship. But it is just the last thing, honestly, I see is some sort of miracle in-season trade that's going to turn this thing around. I mean, this is the team. This is their realistically. Embiid and Paul George have already had so many injury issues in this short season. We're not even at Thanksgiving, and it's injury issues. That's all we're talking about with this team. So Maxey, you guard with your life. So if we're taking those guys off the table, what is the major move they can make to change anything? I mean, there isn't one. So now, Daryl Morey is always super aggressive, and they have the KJ Martin contract that everybody around the league views as something that they might try to use for some sort of down the line trade. But it's certainly not going to be. It would be a small tweak, if anything. I mean, that's why I'm saying they've rescue themselves, and mentality-wise, I mean, I can't say that I would love to be in Memphis tonight to be in that locker room, because when you're a reporter and you have to go into a locker room like that, it's often not fun because, the tension is so thick. But, I mean, I am really curious of what the vibe is like around this after such a heavily publicized team meeting, and the first game after that team meeting was subpar on multiple levels, if we're putting it very, very charitably.
That's probably more charity than they deserve. I think you've also probably given us
I should really be a lot harsher. This is Philly.
Yeah. I mean, you're not in Philadelphia, but you're with us in Philadelphia right now, so you don't have to be charitable. You can yell a little bit.
We're leaning on you, Mark. We need everything here, Mark. We're leaning on you, man. We need everything to help us out here in this one. By the way, I know I said Gifford instead of Daniel Gafford. Before I
didn't want to, I'm not trying to.
I was rolling. I had to ask Mark a question, and that one, but.
Well, I was just going to say, Mark, you've been super charitable with your time, speaking of, so we appreciate you coming by, stopping by, saying hello to our viewers for the first time. Hopefully we can link up in the future after potentially, the third win of the season, whenever that comes for these guys. But we are going to be leaning on you for some more insight and some intel throughout the year. So thank you very much, my friend.
We all silly like the mayor.